Okay, got it. Right. Okay, so let's assume we're live, and so no more swearing from me. Obviously, you never swear, and I've got my 50p's ready, all to get into my 50p meter and make sure, hopefully, the Wi-Fi doesn't crash and the electrics don't go out, and ChatGPT doesn't decide to shut us down. That's an interesting subject we were discussing before. So we thought we'd have a little chat TPP, right? You heard of Chat GPT? This is Chat TPP. That's a great name. I think we should rename the channel Chat GPT. Chat TPP, right? Welcome to Chat TPP, the property professionals channel. We had a really great program last week, although it's quite short. Akil Mehra gave us some interesting insight into the interest rates rises. And prior to this program, we were just having a little discussion on how do we phrase this without getting into trouble by the government. I think this is quite a strong chance of a couple of bank runs happening shortly. Let me explain why and why it affects the property market. So one of the things you'll notice about property, and if you study past recessions, where's my other hand? Yeah. So hang on, I'll make sure I'm on the screen, right? So if you've got property price, let's say property prices, interest rates. As interest rates drop, property prices rise. And conversely, as the interest rates increase, property prices drop. It's something to do with how present value is calculated from, there's a very clever chap who explained it. It's basic finance. Sorry, that's not the Bank of England anyway. So that what it is, it's a calculation of net present value of property cash flows or any asset to today's value. You'll understand that because you're smarter than me. Anyway, so the bigger the bottom number becomes, the smaller the end result is. It's like an equation. So that's why in the early 2020s, when they were throwing down the interest rates because everyone's locked up at home, property prices rose. And people who wanted gardens ended up paying 50 to 100 grand extra for their houses, which I didn't think was a good idea, but hey, we've seen that happen before, right? So anyway, I think there was a bit of a bubble and it's popping at the moment. But let's cycle back a bit and talk about the banking crisis. We were having a little discussion on the banking crisis, and I came across this fascinating figure that they reckon this is a US problem, but as they say, when the US catches when US sneezes, everybody else catches a cold in the world economy. So I'm going to get your view on the banking crisis, but this is a summary so far. Out of the 18 trillion, that's trillion with a T. I think that's 1,000 billion in a trillion, if the way the Americans frame it, right? And billion is 1,000 million. So really huge figures, right? Lots of noughts. Out of the 18 trillion that's on their current balance sheet, 5 trillion was created in the last 3 years. And this is one of these inverse relationships again. And a lot of those banks sort of did the sensible thing. They bought US Treasury bills, i.e. government gilts, as they're known in the UK. So as the interest rates rose, the prices of these Treasury bills dropped. And some of those big banks were alleged to be insolvent. That's what caused. Now, I'm going to hand over to you because I've forgotten the bank names. So enlighten us on this bank runs that were, and this is an interesting subject on bank runs. It goes back to Northern Rock, but go for it. Some of these banks you were discussing, give us a quick summary on which ones went astray.
Oh, hi. Thanks.
Sorry, I forgot to introduce you. My co-host Charanji, we were so engrossed in this conversation.
Yeah, I know. This was a sort of, the banks were Silicon Valley, wasn't it? Silicon Valley Bank, Silvergate. And there was one more, which we couldn't remember the name of.
So SVP was Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah, and there was Silvergate.
Silvergate, that's the other one. And then after that, we've had, what was the Swiss one that we've just?
Credit Suisse. Those Credit
Suisse,
yeah, which got taken over by UBS, yeah. And then there's Deutsche Bank, which we've heard is also, in trouble. Haven't heard any more news about that, but yeah, it's kind of like, it's interesting, isn't it? How what's happening, and it's interesting that governments are stepping in to save these banks.
Mm.
So it does make you wonder where we're heading, doesn't it, with this sort of banking turmoil or crisis. And it would, with the government stepping in, it's almost like they're nationalizing, the banks. And banks, who are the banks going to be owned by if the governments are coming in? That's my question. The government's going to be owning these banks then.
They already do. It's called Northern Rock, and I can't remember what the RBS situation is at the moment. Didn't they own that for ages?
Yeah, and it's almost like there's going to be smaller, there's just going to be bigger, if they're all, bigger banks taking over smaller ones, and they're going to be fewer. I mean, certainly I know from my high street where I live, all the banks have closed. There's just one left. There's no more cash tills. So
don't name the bank. We don't want to get them into trouble, but
yeah, no, but
don't give them ideas. You're the only branch on the high street. Please close. No, don't do that. Yeah, we see that quite a lot. So why is whatever the hell is going on with the banking? And I mean, this is a property program, right? I'm not smart enough to be I'm not smart enough to be a property person anyway. But anyway.
Yeah, but it will. It could lead to a liquidity crisis, which would impact the property market. I know that at the moment, mortgages are freely available, and apparently, I think they're quite good at the moment. So maybe in the longer run.
Hang on a minute, right? We've just gone from 0.1% to about 4%, and it was 4.25 last week, right?
Yeah.
How can you say mortgages are still quite good?
I think I read something which said the completions were up, or mortgage, I did read an article to say that compared to, maybe I better check that actually.
Can you name the source, right? Because look, what I always see is depends on where the source is. So where there's like a vested interest in keeping the market going up and up,
yeah,
they always pick a figure saying, "Oh, it's going to be great," or in 8 years' time the market will recover, or we'll have 10% increase, or property prices in this town in West Midlands has gone up by 11%, while London's just dived by about 15 or something like that. So it's always interesting to study if the group who's doing that report has a vested interest in keeping it positive, because nobody wants to make the property,
Okay, so the source was actually the FT, Financial Times, and the article was actually about UK mortgage rates, and UK mortgage approvals edge up, but are down on last year's levels.
So sorry, they're down on last year's levels, right?
Yeah, they're down on last year's levels, but UK mortgage approvals edge up, but are still down here. So February's figure of 43,500 is more than a third lower than a year earlier, as interest rate rises bite. There
you go, you see.
Yeah.
But what they're probably saying is improved on the month before, or Liz Truss is 46 days. I don't think anything was happening then, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. You see, I love the way journalists.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Oh, they're getting better, yeah, but they're getting better from when the world was about to blow up with Liz Truss. So there you go. So why is that important for property investors, and what do you think they should do? What's your opinion?
On interest rates?
Well, on interest rates and what they're about to buy and so on and so forth.
Yeah, because it's like you said, there's a correlation, isn't there? Higher interest rates reduces demand, because there's mortgages go up, so there's less money, in everybody's pockets. So it has a direct effect. But comparatively speaking, interest rates are quite low compared to where they were, say, 20 years ago.
Yes. Hang on. I hear this argument a lot, right? And I think it's it's a false argument, because compared to 20 years ago, house prices and what you paid for a mortgage relative to people's income was lower. And what's happened is effectively we've had downward interest rates for the last 20 years. Nobody can remember, like 2008, it started coming downwards. Nobody can remember interest rates rising. Well, certainly 12 to sort of 20 years, which means there's a lot of people that own houses and property that have never seen interest rates go up, haven't budgeted for them. And when they do go up, if they've stretched themselves, they're going to be in a little bit of trouble, right? And don't forget which one is it? Section 24 is also kicking in. Landlords are, so if they haven't got fixed mortgages, their rates are rising. Their interest rates are rising. They're getting more pressure in terms of taxation. And you had a great little article about EPCs as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going back to the Section 24, that's a big one, isn't it? Because if they can't offset their interest costs, against the income, I mean, that's huge in terms of the additional tax they're going to be paying.
Yes, and here's the interesting point. So as the interest rates rise, and you'll know the difference between cash flow and a tax bill, not only are you going to have to pay more interest in your mortgage, but because that'll feed into your Section 24 calculation, your landlords are going to have a bigger tax bill. Yeah, exactly. So there will be lots of landlords looking at whether they want to offload their properties, or kind of whether it's still whether they're still cash flowing. So I mean, that's one thing. And then you mentioned EPC targets again. There's new energy efficiency rules which require landlords to provide sort of well insulated houses. But again, this could cost thousands of pounds, and this is part of the UK's net zero targets for 2050. Let's not start on the net zero stuff.
But I mean, the good news is that apparently, if you've got an energy efficient home, then it could command a higher price. So it could make the investment worthwhile.
So a couple of things on net zero. I heard on the radio that the EU has extended from 2030 to 2035 because of the German car industry. There's shenanigans going on. They might let some sort of special fuel be exempt. I haven't got the detail on it, but I had a really interesting conversation with a really experienced developer, and I think you know who I'm talking about. We were discussing earlier, and he said basically to build new, and it was we were at a new development. We were having a discussion there with a couple of friends of mine. To look at a new development, now you've got the insulation, the air source, all of this sort of stuff that goes on. To get it to carbon zero is really, really hard. And we're not talking few years. We were discussing in a property that started last year, and we're comparing it to properties that are starting this year. So not more than 6 months, right? The amount of insulation you're having to put in as a developer is just on a different level. Insulation, in fact, the discussion went, you've got to put more insulation. You've got to have triple glazed windows with argon filling. Don't ask me what argon's an inert gas. I don't know how those things, but you've got to have triple glazed. And apparently this is the big one. If you're of Indian heritage, you're going to love this one. You can't have gas anymore. You can't put your roti on then and make them, cook them as they're supposed to, right? I see you're giggling there, right?
Yeah, I agree with that one. I want to keep my gas cooker.
Yeah, he said that. He said if you're of Indian origin, you love gas cookers, right?
Yeah.
And electric don't do the same thing. I don't understand it, but you know,
Yeah.
I just eat the stuff. Don't ask me. But
Yeah, but you know, this is serious stuff because landlords have got until 2028, and the EPC ratings on properties have to be a minimum of a C rating.
hang on, what was serious stuff? The fact that you can't get your chapatis to blow up and be
Well, that's very serious. Of course, that is.
you will have to end up eating in restaurants now. You know, that art of getting your chapati to be light and fluffy is going to be lost thanks to the government EPC thing, right?
Yes.
Blame the government for that.
Yeah, I've not tried making it in an air fryer, so I don't know whether that would work. But you know,
hang on. This is not a cooking show. This is a property program. We could have a solution for no gas in a property. Get your roti, stick chapati, put it on a tawa, and then stick it in an air fryer. That's we've fixed something in the world, I think.
Yeah, we're talking about you know, what you mentioned earlier about, like, you know, insulating properties. I went to see one recently where they'd used infrared heating panels in the ceilings in this property, and that's really interesting because, you know, like most heating, what it does is it heats the property, right?
Yeah.
It heats the air around you. With infrared panels, that kind of that sort of how can I explain it? It heats you, it heats the individuals in the room. It's gonna.
I've heard of this.
Yes.
I'm trying very hard to keep quiet and listen, but carry on. Yeah, you're going.
I mean, it was just so interesting, and apparently it's really energy efficient as a result, because if nobody's in the room, then, you know, it won't turn on. It'll only turn on when people are in the room. And also, you know, in each, you know, if there's, say, a house of multiple occupation, then different people in different rooms, you know, there are temperature controls, but, you know, it was just incredible. So I think, you know, it's going to be really interesting how developers, you know, kind of proceed with this.
That's interesting you say about this infrared heating. It sounds like it's a microwave they're turned inside out. Instead of cooking the food, they're actually cooking you. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that an apt description?
Well, yeah, because, you know, you get infrared saunas as well, and they are supposed to be healthier for you. So
they're boiling your molecules inside. I don't buy that one. That's
well, it's I'm not sure how it, you know, how it actually operates, but actually it's not radiation. That's my understanding. Should check that, but you know, I know the infrared saunas, it's based on that principle, and if infrared saunas are supposed to be healthy for you, then I should imagine, no, you're doubtful. You don't think it is.
I think radiation. I think infrared is another source of radiation, right?
I think it depends on the color. I think it's you get infrared lights, don't you? You get red or blue. So I think it's yeah. So it depends on which technology they're using. That's my understanding. Surely they wouldn't allow it if it was like microwave technology.
Hang on. Surely they wouldn't allow building technology to incorporate into building techniques that cause damage. Right. Let's analyze that for a minute. What have we just said? Grenfell, where the insulation was combustible. Prior to that, we've had, I don't know if you remember.
Asbestos.
I was going to come to that one. That's earlier, but in between, you had the polystyrene tiles that are fire hazard. Yeah, you've got all this cladding that's rubbish, asbestos. You had lead pipes prior to that, you know, the old Victorian houses. Oh, let me see. Will they allow stuff that'll be harmful to us in the future? Not much.
Okay. Yeah.
They seem to have a track record of doing this, right?
Yeah, yes, okay. I don't think I can argue with that.
You know, every time they come up with something new, I think it's like every time they do something new, there's always a problem, right?
Yeah, and these panels are apparently quite expensive to install, so yeah, that's another factor. You know, yeah, safety aspect is obviously one, but
yeah, I having said that, I'm not a total what's the word I'm looking for? Total Luddite. I really like what they're doing in the States, where they're building homes in a factory. You put a slab down, they crane them in, and there's a particular company that unfolds them. That's the technique. I think that would be the way to go, but I don't think this country will let them do it.
Oh, and are they supposed to be energy efficient?
Oh, these things are magic, because let me give you an example of what's going on. So everyone's used to buying a car that's built in a factory, right? What they're doing prior to Mr. Ford allegedly coming up with the assembly line, cars were built at a workshop, not on an assembly line. So everybody bought the materials to it, put it in, instead of the car whizzing by you on a production line. So it's a similar aspect to how they build homes. Now, if everybody thinks a house is a house and it stays there, right? Obviously it stays there, yeah? But the thing with houses is they're made of loads of little subsystems, yeah? So basically you've got the foundation, the bricks, then you have the electrical cabling, and then the piping, and then you attach all the boilers to it, and then you put the finishes on top. So, you know, it's built up of all these little systems. And what you see a lot, and I think people don't stop and think about this, because I don't usually. I think I've had too much time during the lockdown, basically. The house number is still standing, probably the bricks are still standing, but everything else gets stripped away and replaced. And if you're bringing materials to a site, that's more expensive than building it, refurbing it, and bringing the whole thing in the format they've got it. This company is called Boxable, but they've got various formats. So you build it in a factory and you crane it in. You take away the old one, put the new one in, and most homes need refurbishing at least once every 20 years. If you know, in 20 years' time, your cabling is going to wear out, your plumbing's going to wear out, bathrooms go past their fashion life in about 5 years onwards. Kitchens need replacing between 5 and 10 years. I know some people extend that, you know, last longer than that, but generally speaking. So what you're doing is it's like the old this joke comes to mind. Trigger in Fools and Horses. This is the same broom I've had for years. I've had the handle replaced 7 times, and I've had the head replaced 6 times. That's what goes on in homes. It's much more efficient to, you know, build it on a slab of concrete, take the old one away, put the new one in. But it'll never happen in this country. Shall I tell you why?
Please tell me why.
Party walls.
Oh.
Unfortunately, I mean, I'd love it. I'd be out of a job, but, you know, I think people would have better houses.
But would party walls exist if this system was?
There you go. That's the thing, right? So if you've got 2 detached houses, and they're detached because it's cheaper to build one wall than 2 separate ones, and there's a massive planning issue. So let's give the planners some hate, because they're rubbish at everything. You know, I don't care. I'm not scared of the planners. Please don't refuse my applications. But apart from the guys who are looking at my applications, so the planners are real difficulty. But anyway, you got 2 houses stuck together, right? So if this one says, no, I'm going to take away my house and build my own detached house, first of all, they wouldn't get planning for it because they'd be upset. Secondly, if they were doing that, they've got to leave the existing party wall in place, and you've got to weatherproof it. So sometimes you see buildings that are taken away. What's happening is there's a wall between the buildings that's shared, party wall, right? Mm-hmm. When you take away one building, you've got to weatherproof the remaining wall. Now, theoretically, when the other side of that building was to be taken away, that wall is still a party wall because there's legal ownership. So you could end up with a wall in the middle and 2 detached. You're following the argument. It's a superior solution, but I don't see it happening here.
It could only work where you've got a sort of area of detached properties, right?
Yeah.
So it could work in some instances then. And I think a lot of companies are moving into that. I think there's an Italian company doing the same thing where, you know, the house is pre-constructed and it's very energy efficient as well. So all the windows and everything, you know, are already fitted. And then, yeah, you can basically...
I mean, there's a famous German company called Hofhaus, I think. They've been doing it for years. It's all factory built. Everything gets
Yeah.
wheeled in, and it's fantastic. And they're a premium house. You know, the Brits tried this with the old. What do they call those concrete slabs that they used to put together, and they were rubbish. Everybody used to hate those prefabs.
Breeze blocks?
Prefabs.
Okay.
Prefab. You know,
Oh.
there's a state in Cranford now that they've got rid. What they've actually done is just bricked over it. So they've got these massive. This is in the 80s or 70s. I can't remember. Massive slabs of concrete, put them together, boom, 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 right? But you couldn't get mortgages on the damn things. It's different. It's different now. There's modern techniques of building. There's a whole thing on it, right? But yeah, I love the state's idea. Wheel it in, expand it. It's all brand new. 20 years later, it's all out of fashion. Yeah, just send it back and get a new one, right?
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. You never have to refurbish your home again. Just move out, say, get rid of this one, give me a new one. Yeah. But they're not going to do it in this country. So, you know, that's all I got. I'm going to stop talking. So, any other ideas?
What about?
Oh, yeah. We've got a friend that knows a lot about this pension stuff. Can we get him?
Oh, yes.
Can we get him on to give us an expert opinion?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yes, I think let's do that, because there's been in the last budget, there were lots of changes to private pensions.
So I'm going to give you 2 things to do on your to-do list. Right? Are you ready? You're going to get the pensions expert on. And you're going to test if you can make a chapati fluffy in an air fryer.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to have a go at that. But I know I'm useless at chapati stuff, so I can't make anything.
Everything else gets made in the air fryer these days, so why not?
Right. So
why not give chapatis a go?
Yeah. So there's a chat TPP challenge, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get a pensions expert, and we're going to see if we can get a chapati. It's not quite rising, is it? It's we can't call it blowing up. What would be the English term for that?
Puffed up.
Yeah, that's it. We're going to see if we can get a chapati to puff daddy up, right?
Yeah.
That's our task for next week, and we'll report back to the audience.
Great. Sounds great.
So both of them are totally property driven, because you know it could be whether we keep gas in British homes or not, and have decent chapatis, and what do we do with our pensions? So that's our challenge for next week, and we'll report back to the audience. I think I'm going to start working on it now. Actually, well, at least one of them. You've got 2. I'm going to work on the chapati one, because that's much more interesting. Right.
Okay. Sounds fab.
Sounds fab. Right. So let's see if we can get a pensions expert. I want to understand more about this pension stuff. I'm going to go and disappear. I think you've got to disappear somewhere as well. Brilliant. Great show. I thought that was it's an interesting property chat, right? Remember, it's all property related. Even puffing up chapatis is property related.